can.
Welcome back. As we mentioned, our first discussion this morning is with attorney at law Audrey Matura, no stranger to you guys, but she's here this morning to speak to us about child safety laws that are in place to protect children in Belize from child abuse and neglect. We'll also be touching on various other topics related to children and their protection here in Belize as well. Good morning, Miss Matura.
Morning.
Good morning.
You sound bright for the morning.
You know, I had
right?
my first sip of coffee, so it's kicking in.
I think that's it.
That's it right there. How you doing? Always a pleasure.
Oh, well, I'm doing okay.
So we wanted to get you on the show, Audrey, to talk about child safety laws that are in place. Before we dive a little bit deeper into some of the challenges taking place, let's get an overview of what protections are in place in general for children when we think of their rights and laws deeper into that do protect them.
Well, to begin with, Belize did adopt the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Yes.
So we have a convention that in the principles of that convention operates in our law. But that's just a convention that many nations will adopt. Then we have to make it into local legislation. We have quite a few protections. For example, like we have the Families and Children's Act. That gives you protection in terms of the rights of the child to be with their parents, to an education, and you know the everything that is stated in the convention. In terms of that legislation, there's a particular section that allows the Department of Human Services to apply for a care order, meaning if there's a child in danger, and let's say it's you two, you have a child together, but neither of you is deemed fit enough, then they have to apply to the court, and usually they get an interim order where they take this child away. And then after that, you have to go through the entire court process to then permanently remove the child from those parents and hopefully put them with some relative or someone else competent, like called a foster parent. And many times they can't find people who would take up that responsibility. So sadly, those children end up at the children's home, as we call it, or one of the youth hostel.
This is a challenge that has been expressed multiple times by human department when they do come on the show and talk about foster caring and what that process looks like from family to independent individuals stepping into foster.
Yeah, we saw a situation recently with one child who apparently ran away,
I was thinking of that too.
say it. And then she posted a video on Facebook explaining her reasons. However, when she was located by Human Service or the Families Department, they seemingly had this obligation to send the child back to her mother because a previous court order placed the child under the custody of the mother because the father had passed away.
Right.
But the child was complaining about the mother. Talk a bit about that obligation there and what the law says about that.
So I saw up to the point where she posted the video, and I heard that she was located and brought back into the jurisdiction. But did she get placed back with her mother then?
So the ministry had some challenges because the court order when the father died was to place her in the custody of the mother.
But
that's when she began experiencing certain abuse according to her. However, the ministry was stuck between a rock and a hard place because they held the child, they didn't send her back with the hopes that they could take new evidence to the court to say, hey, this is what we found and we don't think the child is safe here.
Well, that's interesting. So that's a whole lot of things.
Yeah, I would imagine.
In the sense that the Human Services Department one doesn't have an attorney. It's the same social workers who have to go to court and pretend to be an attorney, and no insult to them. It's unfair to them. Two, there are provisions in the law that they could not return that child to the mother, even though there was an order. Because like I say, the Families and Children's Act has a section for an interim care order. In that section there, it basically says that they have to quickly do a report, which they had sufficient time to do a report. The child had run away. The child had already made accusations of sexual abuse. Why would you return him to the same home? So I was privy to some additional information with that case, in that a relative or several people that knew the situation reached out to me. And according to what I was told by the relative, when the father passed away, indeed, the child stayed with the mother, but then the mother got a boyfriend.
Yes.
And she had complained, and Human Services had already removed that child. But that child was removed to Belmopan and stayed there only 1 year with a relative. And everything was going good, but the Human Services Department feels that their role is to reunite families, which is indeed one of their rules, but you cannot take back that child to the same toxic situation.
Yes.
So one of the first things they had to make sure is that the mother didn't have the same boyfriend. You can't remove the child from there for that reason, and then when it's time to put her back in the same situation. Absolutely no. And so I think they failed there. They don't want to admit it, but they failed there. The foster home was not rejecting the child. And how could you take her back to a situation where she's alleging that the same abuse is going on? And then there were allegations that the guy, one of the guy who was trying to capitalize on the situation, an older guy, lives in the same vicinity. How could you do that? You put back this very vulnerable young lady into the exact same situation. I think they failed the child there, and even when they retrieved her, that's not the place to take her. She was very explicit as to why she ran away from home.
Yeah, very
and
clear.
It's not the first case. I've dealt with a lot of cases in the family court, and without calling names, there are many instances where the children have alleged sexual impropriety. Some of them have literally been assaulted, and they're returned to the same home, or the investigation is not pursued. Like I had a particular case where the child ran away, went into hiding again, and sadly it's always these girls. And when I saw the entire report on the child, she was sexually abused when she was like 7 or 8 years old. And these people need to be trained that when a child gets abused, when a female or even a male gets abused at a young age, it's when they hit puberty that they will start to act out, because that's when they realize
They can process
what had actually happened to them. They get triggered, their trauma triplicate, if not, is 100-fold. And so you have to be trained to know that in terms of the developmental stages of a child or a person, you go through stages. And so when they get assaulted at a particular age, that stage, they get stunted mentally, emotionally, not physically, because many times because of the abuse, they sprout even faster. So where is the training in the department? And this is not anything against those who are already there. It goes back to, where do we put our resources? Clearly, we're not bothered. That's not where the biggest money is.
Yeah.
We care about all kinds of contracts in government, but do we care about money in these departments where it's needed? It has to be holistic. You have to have your trained therapists, psychologists, and stuff like that. The social workers are only trained to a certain limit. They're not legal officers. You need to have legal officers. You don't have that to advise you on a situation like this. Then you have to, well, I think they have good access to whatever government medical institution is there. But you have to have people trained enough to understand the holistic development of a person.
Because when you look at the implications of something like this, it's a trickling effect. You might think and say, oh, well, this isn't where the money is at per se, but the moment this child or these children are so broken, you're breaking the fabric of what makes a developing nation or a developed nation, which is our children. So you have all these fractured children that the system is not catering to. At the end of the day, they'll have to spend more money longer down the road working or helping to develop
and
these
these children, many of them cannot become productive, participating citizens in the country. Their trauma is too much. So this has always been my concern in every government. Your best resource has got to be your human resources. And you can't try and address me when I'm already a teenager, then you worry what I'll do or not, or when I'm an adolescent, or when I'm a senior. For you to have a truly developed country, You have to start with the kind of care you give to your children. We like to say, it's cliche now, oh, the children are our future, but they are.
Yeah.
So imagine a child gets born into a home where there's a lot of abuse. The mother neglects the child, not because she's necessarily a bad person, because she herself is a traumatized person who never got the help. Now this mother is trying to figure out how to raise a child, but she has no example of how to raise a child because she herself wasn't raised properly. So it's a cycle, it keeps going on. At what point will our country say, you know what? How do we solve many of our social problems? We may not solve it 100%, but we can solve key ones. How do we solve crime? And crime, I mean, not only those who go out and kill, but all the incest going on, there's a lot of sexual abuse going on that is not reported, you know. And it worse weren't reported when we see in the social media and different places, people like to say, oh, then legal hack, then look for it. You know, that tells you that person, and most often women that are saying that, have themselves been abused, and they cannot come to terms with admitting what that child is going through, because to admit it that is to admit that it happened to them, so they try and normalize it.
You know, one of the things too, though, Audrey and Paul, that I've observed as being overlooked and kind of just accepted are other types of abuse that seems to have been gone unmentioned: neglect and even child labor. Oftentimes we see kids roaming around Belize City at ages where they should be in primary school, or we see kids tendering jobs at ages where they should be in primary school or working. Yeah. Are these types of abuse you find common in the courts where people are presenting?
No, those are overlooked. They've normalized. They could barely address the issue of child endangerment and of some kind of abuse, usually physical or sexual abuse. But there's another kind of abuse going on. There's emotional and psychological and verbal abuse. But because you don't come with a bruise, they don't see it. Then this is where I said we fail to have the trained people who can help these children. Imagine we have a department, and I'm sure they don't even have 100 staff that deals with these cases. One social worker might be trying to deal with 100 cases. Yeah. How can he or she have time to go and deal with these issues? And nothing against our social workers, but often some of them come from very abusive home themselves. So your bias, your experience triggers you when you deal with these things. So it's a whole lot to unpack. And while they try their best with the limited resources and knowledge they have, they truly don't know better. I mean, I've gone to court up against social workers who clearly they're out of their league there. And it's unfair to them because that's not their training. Mm-hmm. The legal aspect is not their training. Their training is to be a social worker, to go out and meet and do their aspect and give reports, not to come to court then and be the prosecutor and testify in their own case. Could you imagine? I have a social worker next to me who is the person who investigated the child and has to come to court to give her own evidence and be her own prosecutor in the case. Mm-hmm. Something is absolutely wrong with that.
Where does the laws, where are the laws where culture is concerned, though? In certain cultures, we see kids working very young when they could have possibly not even completed primary school. We see them on the sides of the road selling coconut water, selling fruits. Where does the law come in place with cultures like that?
Well, we definitely are against child labor.
Yeah.
Culture cannot trump the law, but the reality is there used to be truancy officers that would go and check throughout the districts, villages, and so we've lost that system. It does not exist anymore. Like I say, the biggest budget is not the Department of Social Services, and depending who becomes the minister, there'll be even less because they find how to siphon their own little money from that to help their constituency in other things. So politics over the care of the children. Yeah. And the truth is our population is a very young population. More than 50% is youth, and well, young people below 25. We have a very young population. A lot of these young people are sexually abused, and I must insert here that sadly, a lot of these girls abused are encouraged by their own mother. And it's very simple, but profound. I've met women who have told their story about abuse, how their own mother put them in a room with older men and trafficked them basically. And they said plain, their mom said to them, well, someday I may have sex, so best I make money off of it. And that's the tone. I have been in situations where girls tell you plain, miss, I can't testify, I can't go against my family because that man is the only man providing for my family.
It's survival.
It's happening a lot. There are a lot of girls in high school right now that will not admit it, but they're being groomed by older men who are paying their education and their mother getting some little bit of money. It's happening. We put all this money in ads about human trafficking. That's a form of human trafficking. But where are the boots on the ground to go address that?
I think that has been the prevailing point you've been making, is that human resources, we're lacking it where social workers are concerned. When you speak about the prevalence of these issues across our country and only a handful of social workers to deal with them, clearly that won't work. And then you speak about truancy officers as something that doesn't necessarily exist anymore. Again, a human resource issue. And I also think I agree with you that there's perhaps a culture now of silence that's being propagated within communities and families.
And social media now.
Right. And so how much now, I wonder, do children feel as if they don't have help, as if they have to remain silent, and this is the reality that they just have to accept?
Well, let me tell you, in my opinion, no, this is my opinion, children these days don't know that what they're going through is not normal. Why? The videos they see, the movies they see, the songs they hear has normalized sexualization. I have seen and been to private parties and I've been to public events where children are brought on the stage and Lord Jesus, they kind of dancing, so select as we would say, and the adults cheering on. I am still flabbergasted by that because of, not that children shouldn't dance. When I was a child, every party I go, I love dancing. But I can't imagine the flip and the peel myself open and the adults and then the way they dress them. So here is what I've always thought about. I have always felt that we've never, ever had a leader in this country, not a prime minister, not a minister of social services, that understands and appreciates the importance of developing our children if we want to develop our nation. None. And then could say anything they want, I tell you as it is. There's never been a comprehensive plan like, what is the social problem in this country? How do I address these children? Like, for example, at birth, we could register, they're born every hospital. The minute that child is born, you should assign some kind of social worker to track where is this child living, what kind of home. Or from the minute the woman comes to the clinic pregnant, the data is there, but you need to now go and check what kind of home, what kind of support this one will need.
We have a better system for guns and deportees. But for guns, we could track from the moment a gun come into the country to where it lands and who has it and the use of it. More than we could track our children. And
so we've never had that holistic planning. So these are the things I believe you need to have. You have to have a plan that you genuinely, how do I break this cycle where we have children that are so abused, these same children become criminal, they become parents, abusive parents, they become unproductive, they become the same one exploiting other people. How do I try and curb that? We've never had a holistic plan to put the money into that. Then you have to say, okay, where's my army of workers? That, and when I say army, I mean that's the social workers, that is the medical people, that is the attorneys to help you with the legitimacy of everything. So we've never had that, the army, and then we need the budget. We need the budget.
Which we clearly don't have.
We need the budget. And then there has to be a mass educational campaign, because this is a mindset to change, you know. You see grown men, I have a teen daughter now, and I swear when they look at my daughter, and I tell her, hey, she's not even 16 yet, you know. I tell her immediately, because there's this lustful culture in our men, and we don't want to admit it. I am a grown woman and men do that. Imagine what these vulnerable little girls go at. It is normal for when you're going through your teens. or just pre-puberty, that you start finding yourself and you like the attention. That doesn't mean you're a flirt. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's a normal part of development. And then these older men take it for a signal like, hey, she'd invite me, but she's just a child.
Yeah.
Or he's just a child. And then they abuse, and then the bigger society say, oh, they're hot, they may like it. Then it's really tragic how that happens.
We're going to stick up in there, Ms. Matura, and then we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have more on this very insightful conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in a couple minutes.
Ta-da!
I saw this post.
We at Fulltech Systems understand that technology isn't just a tool, it's a game changer. At home, smart devices and AI are revolutionizing daily life. In education, tech is making learning more interactive and accessible for students and educators alike. For businesses and government, it's driving innovation, streamlining operations, and unlocking growth, leveraging tech for better services, infrastructure, and security. At Fulltech Systems, we help you thrive with cutting-edge solutions, partnering with leaders like Dell, HP, Microsoft, APC, Fortinet, Cisco, and Tomy8. We deliver the right products for your needs, whether it's boosting efficiency, improving customer engagement, or scaling operations. Connect with us and let's drive innovation together. Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you come for the price, but stay for the service.
Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with Audrey Matura, attorney at law, and the discussion is all about child abuse. And I think what we spent the first part of the conversation speaking about are the societal contributions, the challenges in place, the lack of human resources for certain departments in combating issues of child abuse. I think what we should spend the rest of the discussion highlighting, though, are the legalities, the penalties in place for some of these crimes. One of the things I think a lot of people would be surprised to know are that the fines are very small for some of these crimes that are outrageous. One of the moments that it takes me back to, Audrey, I believe it was last year when a video went viral of a man abusing a child. And it sparked public outrage. Of course, that
Sexually abusing?
No, it was physical abuse.
On the motorcycle, right?
Yes, on the motorcycle,
Oh, yes,
physically hitting this little boy.
Wasn't he sent to...
He was. But the reason why I highlight it is because I think that's one of the lesser common moments where we see the public really sparking outrage. And we even saw, I believe it was the commissioner at the time, Chester William, take on that case, ensuring that that person would have received the maximum penalty.
You know, one of the things I've noted, Sabrina, is that every time these abuse cases come up, there is a degree of outrage.
Yeah,
from
but usually
the
it's when it's videoed or it's caught on camera. That's when you see the maximum reaction from people.
Or when we post somebody being charged for sexual abuse, this person is perverted in some way, abused a child, there is a degree of outrage. I think just yesterday we posted a case of incest with a father, right? and a child, 12-year-old daughter, I believe, or something to that in up north.
And there's one where at the school the child was whipped too.
How does that work, actually?
But let's talk about some
penalties.
Then
remember to ask me that.
We have some time left, but we want to cover all of these things.
Are these penalties in our laws?
In my view, not stiff enough. I was reading here because I wanted to cite them. For example, this one, and we have this section under the criminal code: kidnapping, abduction, forced marriage, abandonment, and incest. For the kidnapping, it says here you may extend it may be 10 years or up to imprisonment for life, but that seldom happens. It may be 10 years.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the best one. It says maybe imprisonment for life. Then there's the one of forcible abduction, that's 13 years. So let's say like this little girl was over Guatemala because she really was abducted, but then she's made to read this and
Those
make
are
it
so
that would be
fewly
13.
reported though.
And then listen for compulsion of marriage, which happens. It's 2 years, but this one is interesting because before you could have gotten married at the age of 16 with the consent of your parents, but
Yes.
that law changed.
Yes.
You have to be 18. So that would be hard. This like
That
this.
changed about a year or 2 years ago,
Just
right? That was last
just-
year.
I think last year, but
Yeah.
I can't keep track of the time, but it's recent.
Yes.
So, but this one, compulsion of marriage of a minor is difficult now because you have to be 18. But can you be 18 and be forced to marry? Yes. So that's 2 years. Then there is cruelty to children, including abandonment. You only get if the indictment is on at the High Court. It's 10 years. But it cannot exceed 20 years, and then not less than 15 years for a certain. If the person is 13 years or over who commits an offense under the subsection 1 and 2, that offense is in relation to person who is below 12 years, then you get more. So the younger the person, you get more. But this one is good in 15 years, but may extend to imprisonment for life for abandonment. So I like when it says imprisonment for life. With me, that's when I would execute them, because the damage you do to a child, I have met up with people I helped prosecute their cases when they were children against their own father or uncle or some stranger. I have met these ladies. It's now 15 years later, and the damage is not gone. When they tell you what all they went through and still going through from that trauma, it's for life. That's a sentence for life. Any woman who has been sexually assaulted, or young boy or man that has been sexually assaulted, equally, men, it is a trauma for life. Then you want to know why they have these sexual perversions or why they do certain things, and sometimes they become abusers themselves.
Talk about abuse
But wait, I don't
with
finish
child
tell you
and
the
child.
penalty. I can say. Incest.
Okay.
Incest.
That's a common one.
Right. Any person who carnally knows another person who is, to that person's knowledge, that person's grandchild, child, sibling, niece, nephew, or parent, commits an offense and shall, on conviction thereof, be liable to imprisonment for not less than 12 years, but may extend to imprisonment for life.
Wow. So in a case like that where it's
12
incest
years.
and it's a child, though, it's an incest and it's a child, would you be like looking at several pieces of those fines? So it's a child, it's also a family member, so it could be extended for more than
Yes.
12 years.
One of the more recent stories that we highlighted was sexual assault that took place at a high school level, where I believe both persons were
minors, one 14
yeah,
and one 13.
nothing more than 14 years old. What laws are in place to protect that type of abuse?
Sorry. Ask me the question
Yeah,
again.
I know you had to watch on the penalties.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a story that we highlighted last week where a sexual assault took place at a high school in Belmopan, but the two parties involved were minors as well. What laws are in place for that type of abuse?
Okay, several things. If the child is over 12 years, they have criminal culpability. So that child can be arrested and charged. But I think the most dangerous thing is if at 12 you are already doing that, you are a predator. And there has to be an investigation, because your predisposition to already be a rapist, because that's what you are becoming, a rapist. Your predisposition did not start that day at that high school. There has to be something in your background. There's two things that can happen. Some people are born with some pathological, psychological problem that makes them have this propensity towards crime, like Ted Bundy and those kind of guys.
Yeah.
And some people, they are a product of their environment, not their DNA, it's their environment. Something they see at home, something they experience, some exposure they have, because at 12, I don't know how old this child, but it has to be over 12, you're at high school now. For you to feel that it's okay to sexually assault and rape another colleague, that tells you that's a dark mind that you have there. So They can be prosecuted, definitely can be prosecuted. The DPP has to look at the circumstances. We've had cases where it's so-called boyfriend, girlfriend. It's not rape, but it is rape, but in the sense that these are little lovers. And sometimes the charges are dropped because they're like, okay, they're both young. But where there has been this level of violence in this case, which what happened, I can't see them not prosecuting. They have to prosecute. That child has become a predator. And I have seen cases when I was a prosecutor where some young men got off on a sexual offense, and within a month to a year, they are reoffending. So that is the criminal aspect. But the civil aspect now, that school owes a huge responsibility to that child, and the parents should deal with that aspect as well. Now, it means that in that school, there are issues that the teachers are either not aware of, or the school doesn't have the capacity to be able to say, you know, let me find out what's going on, or there are these social issues that we are not addressing. So it is a case to observe and see what will be the outcome. But I'm telling you all, nothing against the family or anybody, but that child is already a predator.
So one of my next questions that I had regarding that case was, what level of accountability does the school have?
High level.
Because I believe, if I remember correctly, they had called off classes. So this was after
there was a protest.
Yeah, there was a protest taking place, but they had called off classes. And so these kids would have been there during the time where they should have already left. Does the school still bear some level of responsibility?
I really don't want to comment on it because I might end up being the attorney in this matter. So I don't want to preempt. I don't know all the facts, and so I don't want to comment on that yet.
So here's another question. Let's focus on parents for a bit. What should parents and guardians know about reporting suspected cases of abuse? And do you find that sometimes mothers specifically have it hard in that they feel a level of fear where the men in the family is concerned? Like, I suspect something, but one, I love this man. And two, afraid if I go say something, me and my picnic want to in a more danger. What should parents and guardians know about how to approach these situations if they suspect an abuse?
Well, my opinion, and my opinion is based on years of experience working with abuse and having lived in an abusive home. My opinion is that there's no advice I can really give those parents and guardians, because in terms of reporting, simply because if you are in that situation and you feel you can't say anything, it is likely that you have been abused. And what happens when you're abused and you're seeing it, the pattern again, if you admit, if you even accept that your child is being abused, it's not about your child, it's about your trauma being triggered, and you relive it all over. So sometimes you try and block it out, and in trying to block out your own pain, you are unable to be sensitive to what your child is going through. In the many cases that I have dealt with sexual offenses, I have not met one case where when I talk with the child and find out that the abuse, that when I then peel the layers and I talk to the mother, I find out that she too was a victim of abuse. And then if you're lucky enough to meet the grandmother, you find out that, look, it's like
generational.
It's like generational. Wow. And one of the ways to deal with it is to talk about it. But the hardest thing is for me to tell my children, well, you know, when I was 11 years, I was sexually abused, and I'm saying this because it happened to me. I wasn't penetrated, but a doctor, and I'm yet to go confront that doctor. As an adult, it still triggers me when I think what he did to me. I mean, he fumbled me and everything. And at that time, I was a child. And I am going to be 56, and I still feel the terror of it. So I can't imagine the terror girls have gone through when they ripped off their clothes, when their own father is penetrating them, all that trauma. And then we wonder why they're acting crazy, why they turn to drugs, why they're drinking, why they become some of them become sexually promiscuous. No. I always say, when you see those signs, ask yourself, what trauma is that person drowning? So the normal or the more mentally stable parents who do not have that kind of trauma, of course, the best thing is to go and talk to your child first. And many times the children, they hide it. I know like a recent case, I know too many cases.
Yeah.
A recent case that was in the media. When I spoke to that child could not tell her mother, because every time she told her mother, her stepfather said, she just they act bad or whatever. Like anytime she tried to form a bond with her mom to say, Mom, my stepdad is, he says, she's acting bad or whatever, that because I punish her. But what happened in a particular case, a child kept a diary. A child kept a diary. And years later, you didn't think that diary will come back and haunt you. And it was very simple what was happening. The mother wanting this relationship to work, and this person being prestigious and whatever, we tend to think because they come in nice suits and jackets that they're not predators. Sometimes they're the best predators. We see it in the churches, we see it with the pastors, we see it with police officers, we see it with anyone. So the thing is, the people who will assault your child, the people who will rape your daughter, sodomize your son, are the people immediately around you. When I was young, and so I have my own traumas, because when I was young, my family had this happy, there's this man, Don Tolino, we used to, not Don Tolino, a man Sosa in my neighborhood. And when I would come from high school, they're like, give Mr. Sosa a hug, like, because he's an old man. But every time, and your parents would go, give him a hug. And when I go to hug him, he has one hand and he starts playing with my breast. And how do you tell your parents that that's what this man does each time?
Not
Because
this
they're right there.
man.
They're right there.
Yeah.
And he's doing it, but they don't see it because the way he holds you, right? And then you start wanting to avoid that person, It was until I was an adult I was able to tell my mom some of these things. But then when I found out, my mom was abused too. So she could not address that issue. You block it out. So did that make my mom a bad person? No. Didn't make her a bad person. It made her an adult who still has trauma that she couldn't resolve, so she couldn't help her daughter.
Yeah, so this is a very important conversation. Here's my final question. In your opinion, how can we as a society help to advocate to keep our institutions accountable where child safety is concerned? What can we do as a society to push for stiffer penalties, for stronger legislation, for more human resources? What do you think
a
the
bigger
part
budget?
we can play?
Well, I think we can play a huge part. One, let us stop being judgmental on social media and attacking these young people, women and men. Don't do that, because that only makes them go into the recesses of the shadow and not say anything. They remain victims, and when they have children, their children become victims because they didn't know how to address it. Two, we genuinely need to learn to talk with our children about sex, sexuality, and stuff like that. Be very, very open, be very explicit. Like I tell my children, I am your first teacher. I will tell you how sex operates. I will tell you how children are born. I will tell you about orgasms. Don't be ashamed to use the word vagina or penis. Those aren't bad words. Those are the proper words. Not poochie and tootie and willy. Because then how you go to complain to the police that they touch me toochie? There's no such thing in law. You know, they take advantage. So let's be very explicit about it. Let's stop being hypocritical where we idolize sexuality in songs and we dance it, but when it comes to talking about it, like I'm talking about it, when I'm in my home, I said, let's talk about it raw and open. Because I grew up in an era where they never talked to us. I was 13 when I found out that babies don't come from plane. They come from inside their mama's tummy, and I didn't know how they even got there. I was 21 having my first child and not understanding what all was happening to me. I think I was pooing myself, not knowing it's the baby pushing out. So because we came from an era where we didn't know those things. So I don't want that era to continue. I'm very open with my children about all those things. So let's be conversant about that. But you see, the same way we lobby for all kind of things, we need to start lobbying. We the people, you all are bring up the topic, that is good, but the conversation has to be bigger. We have to pressure our government to put a bigger budget there, because if we keep having in our societies all these sick children who become adults, and that includes myself, it's not all of us who are able to navigate and realize what happened. I'm in my 50s when I start unraveled some of the things and understood what trauma was and how much what I went through as a child affected me. And I'm an educated person, and I am telling you it's hard.
Yeah.
And my education helps me a bit. Could you imagine if people who don't have access to the resources and so on? It's not that educated people know more than uneducated, and I'm talking about formal education. It's just that when you have formal education, you tend to read more and want to know more. And then you learn. So imagine people who it's just bread and butter day to day. You think they have any time to go read any psychology and understand the traumas of rape and understanding that the history of slavery and imprisonment and genocides and all of that, to understand how in wars the first thing that happens, they rape the woman, and many children were children of rape in wars, and how slavery, the reason some of us are not fully black is because the slave master or their sons sexed us day, noon and night. As soon as you have a little bud, they already know that they will sell your virginity to the plantation. So those are things. It comes, and we have to talk about it raw and explicit. We have to talk about it. But our government has to say, my priority is my human development. And if I don't break the cycle with these children now, it will never break. These children will continue. Talk to the guys who are in prison, and not one of them will tell you that they didn't suffer some form of abuse as a child. And it's not necessarily sexual abuse. A lot of physical, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse. And some people, I will go a step further and say hunger abuse, because they really literally didn't have anything to eat. But if we don't want to see the problem, then we can't find the solution.
So I'll just say as my final words on my part, and I know you're going to want to leave big up where you want to do, but on the topic, for my part, I'll just have you know that I think you're doing a good job. As a parent, I see how involved you are as well, how proud you are of your children, how much you big them up. Yeah, you're always there. And so I just want to commend you for that after all you've shared and how vulnerable and personal you've been on this set.
Well, what has happened is that I never learned a lot of things. I never realized how much I didn't learn, and I had no good example of parenting, and I never realized how abused both my parents were. They never finished primary school. They went to standard 2, standard 3 the most. And I used to be very judgmental over the things they did to me. But now I understand it, and my mission is to break it with my children. At first, I always say publicly at first, with my first 2 sons, I had become physically abusive to them. But I think going away to study, when I went away to do law, and I learned so much more, and couple that with my experience as a journalist and then as a prosecutor, I think I try and be a better mom for them, because I realized that I was starting to replicate that pattern of abuse I went through on my children. So I had to break that cycle, but it has to be a conscious decision.
Well, I understand that you have a shout out that you would like to share this morning, very close and near to your heart.
Well, my final child, I have 3 children. My daughter is graduating from Belize High School. I want to give her a shout out.
Wow.
Yes, she is.
Congratulations. And she's been on the show before as well.
Yes, Ariana Alexis Matura Shepherd. I made sure I gave her the Matura as a Christian name. And I want to say that my daughter is graduating, and I want parents to know that yes, I helped a lot, but I never did any of her homework. Whatever she has achieved, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm not those helicopter parents, so I'm very proud of her. And all my children, I don't do their work.
Yeah.
So what they achieve it on their own. So she's going away, thank God, we got our student visa.
Nice.
And she's going away to become a mechanical engineer.
Wow.
And I celebrate it because I was first generation educated person in my family. And the only female in my family that has an education. My sisters never had that. And the one who has gone the highest studying and become a professional. So for me to pass on that legacy to my daughter, it's important. And that's one way how we break the cycle of abuse. Education does help. It doesn't mean if you don't have an education, you can't be a productive person. It depends on your road. But education is what got me out of poverty, abuse. Another time I can sit and tell you all my whole story about the level of abuse I went through. And it's education that helped me and made me financially stable, that I don't have to be in an abusive situation, and that I can offer better for my children.
Excellent.
Well, you know, Audrey, I think it goes without saying that it's always a pleasure having you here on the show. We
is.
see it in the comments section, people saying that they enjoy seeing you here and hearing you're so passionate about what you do, and even sharing your own personal life as well. So thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
welcome.
All right. We take another quick break, and the next conversation coming up is equally as interesting. When we come back, it's all about uplifting Belize through a spiritual mission in law enforcement. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.